I did not know that this chair could come up this high. So, hello. We're on a better angle this time, which is great. So today I'm not dressed for the Great British weather, not today or in the concept of what we're talking about. We are talking about another Prohibition comic book, and it's also raining outside. Yesterday I got hailed on my way home, so that was nice. But today we are talking about Road to Perdition. So many may be familiar with the 2002 film called Road to Perdition. It stars Tom Hanks, Jude Law, Daniel Craig and the late and great Paul Newman. But did you know that it was originally a graphic novel? Released in 1998 under DC's Vertigo imprint, Road to Perdition follows a father and son duo in a crime noir set in the Depression era. It is the late Prohibition era, but I know there's a little bit of overlap in there, so we will just be saying Depression for the sake of this video. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with DC's Vertigo imprint, has a lot less restriction on it than the main imprints and the main continuities and titles. It's not as family friendly as their main imprint. It sort of strays away a lot of the time from your sort of classic superhero narrative and what we expect to see in a comic book. They often cater towards more adult audiences, and common themes that you can find under the Vertigo imprint do include crime, graphic violence, and of course profanity. Some works that you may be familiar with that actually came from the Vertigo imprint include The Sandman, which is very popular, Preacher, which is one of my favourites, and also Fables. Vertigo Comics was discontinued in 2020, with most of its titles either joining DC's main universe or going towards the new imprint that they created, referred to as the Black Label. Now, I haven't looked this up, but I believe that Black Label did start before Vertigo was discontinued, because I remember being in college and collecting the Batman White Knight comics when they came out, which is a very good story, by the way, from what I remember. Again, I was like 16, 17. Good title. I remember that whenever anyone says DC Black Label to me, I just instantly think of White Knight. So good. I just see the big chunky label in the corner, just, you know, you've got this lovely cover and then you've got a big chunky label. It says Black Label. However, when I was doing the research for this video, it turns out that they are bringing the Vertigo imprint back, and it is this month, February 2026. I haven't looked too much into what it is that they're bringing out, but I know that apparently it's going to be more creator based. Creator driven was the words that I believe I saw. So we shall see. So we've got the Vertigo imprint back, but it was discontinued in 2020, so there's been a little bit of time. So Road to Perdition is authored by Max Allan Collins, and it is illustrated by Richard Pierce Rayner. So Rayner is an English comic book artist, and he has various credits to his name. His portfolio contains work from Hellblazer, Swamp Thing, Doctor Who, just to name a couple of them for you. In 1989, Rayner actually won an Eisner Award for the Russ Manning Promising Newcomer. His style is often very realistic and hyper detailed. It's very highly rendered. It is one of the most beautiful styles I've ever seen, and it's something that I would love to replicate in my own work. Like, I love that sort of vintage style that he's got. It's very different to any other. Like, whenever I pick up a comic book, obviously everyone's got their own unique styles, but Rayner's work is just absolutely phenomenal. Like, it just feels like you've opened it, and I do go on to mention this a bit later, and it's like seeing a movie play out on a page. It's so nice. I don't know what else to say. It's really quite lovely. I look like I'm being held at gunpoint. I don't know. It's weird because I'm talking to myself in my room on a Friday about comic books. So the artist spent 4 years drawing Road to Perdition. It was a very long time frame in terms of how a lot of comics, especially for DC, tend to have like a quick turnaround. Unless it's Hush 2, but we're not going to talk about Hush 2 because It's not very good. Collins, who, if you have seen my Sky of the Bat video, I did talk about him a little bit, but I understand that some of you will not have watched my Sky of the Bat video, nor will you be interested in it, so let me tell you about him real quick. So Max Allan Collins is an American writer specialising in the crime and mystery genre. He has an extensive catalogue of work over screenplays, novels and comics. He also produced a novelisation for Road to Perdition, which came out in 2002 to coincide with the movie release. I haven't read the novelisation of it, but I believe that it is meant to follow how the movie played out and not the comic itself. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about the movie in this video, but if you've seen it and you've read the comic, you know, they do tend to take two very different paths. I personally prefer how the graphic novel played out, but that might just be me. I don't know. I've met people who have only watched the film. They don't like comic books and they're like, no, I liked it, but I also like Tom Hanks, so, you know, turn into Mickey Mouse a bit. Right, Road to Perdition. We're gonna get into it now. For the sake of this video, I will be talking about the first graphic novel that was released for this series, just because there are multiple spin-offs and sequels, which I have not read because I only discovered them yesterday. And they're also quite hard to get your hands on over here where I am in the UK. So I need to do a bit more investigative research into that, because I do sometimes read comics online. I get them through like what was Comixology or, you know, other buyers. I like to buy them because I like to support the industry, but I do prefer a physical copy of a book. It just I don't have the space anymore, but it's just so nice to have that. I think that's the best way to experience a comic book. But this isn't about the philosophy of comic books. I'm getting distracted again. This story is told to us from the perspective of Michael O'Sullivan Jr. He is the son of Michael O'Sullivan, who is referred to throughout this comic as the Angel of Death, or most characters do just call him the Angel. For the sake of this video, whenever I say Michael, I'll be talking about the son. Whenever I say O'Sullivan, I'll probably be talking about the dad, or I will call him the Angel. I haven't figured out what I'm doing with that yet, but we will see what I end up saying. I'm going to be very careful about spoilers, so I won't be revealing too much about the plot or anything like that. I will try to be careful. I'm not saying that I'm going to be 100% spoiler free. If you did watch the Sky of the Bat video, I do talk about history. This will be very similar to that because there is a goldmine of references in this. And there was one point where I got up and I was like, oh my god, oh my god. Like, I was so excited. It was a bit sad, really. Before the main sort of fiasco goes down in chapter 1, we're obviously in the boys' bedroom. So you got Michael and his younger brother Peter. Now, what I was really interested in these scenes was some of the references that appear. Everything again is very intentionally placed. So in the room we do have some references to a Hollywood actor by the name of Tom Mix. Before John Wayne there was Tom Mix. But this isn't about John Wayne, is it? So Tom Mix was a movie star known for his work in westerns. He was even friends with Wyatt Earp, and if you're not familiar with Wyatt Earp, he was an American law enforcement agent, and he is best known for being a participant in the gunfight at the OK Corral. So Wyatt Earp and Tom Mix were that good friends that when Wyatt Earp died in 1929, Tom Mix would be a pallbearer at his funeral. The inclusion of Tom Mix in this comic is not only a nod to the time in which the story itself is set in, but it's a reminder of children being children. Before all of the tragedy envelops, we have Michael and his younger brother Peter, and they are allowed to be just what they are, which is children. And I think the fact that we see them being kids, and you know, they're idolizing someone, they have these wild fantasies of what they want to be and who they are, and you know, they don't have the same sort of like outlook that an adult would. I think the fact that we get to see this is very important later on, because as I go on to mention, Michael especially, he has to grow up before he should. Like, the things that he witnesses on this journey and all of like that, it's just a bit horrible for him, to be honest. So childhood curiosity can be good or bad, and in this case it is the latter. So Michael is very curious as to what his dad, the angel, does. So he decides he's gonna follow him. He gets in his car in the back somewhere, and Michael O'Sullivan Sr., he's like, oh no. He goes to work, you know, like everybody else, like me, like you, like your friend next door, your neighbour down the street, your friend down the street, and your neighbour next door. So O'Sullivan is a enforcer for a mob boss. He's working for a man called John Looney. Now, one of my favourite things about Colin's work, and what is a recurring pattern in a lot of the stuff that I've read that he's produced, is how he's able to merge reality with fiction. I think Road to Perdition is no stranger to that at all, and perhaps is more true to life than it would initially appear when you first read it, because when I first read it, and it's a couple of years ago now, I was able to enjoy it, but now that I'm rereading it, it's like, you know how they say about Harry Potter is that every time you watch it, you see something that you didn't before, and you can rewatch it like a million times and you'll be picking out new things every time you watch it. I felt the same way reading Road to Perdition again. There were things that I would never have thought of before, like reference wise. So let's talk Looney. So John Looney is what us Yorkshire folk would call a wrong'un, and there are a lot of wrong'uns in this book, but for the sake of those that are not from Yorkshire, he was a Irish mob boss. Is it Illinois or Illinois? He was based in Rock Island, Illinois. As a journalist, I was quite intrigued by his tabloid paper that I actually first discovered through this comic book, and then I was like, that's quite an interesting detail, let me look at that. He did actually have a tabloid paper. It was called the Rock Island News. It's where he would publish unjust material to blackmail and intimidate anyone who had annoyed him that day. Like if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed and was like, oh, little Jimmy down the street has, I just don't like looking at him, he'd do something with that. He'd probably write an article about why little Jimmy should be banged up. In other words, he wouldn't last 2 minutes with Ipso. And the press was just chock-a-block with fabricated tales and like images that had been falsely put together to lean into the narrative that he wanted to portray of people to get his own way. It is worth noting here, if you are familiar with the 2002 film, that they did change his name to John Rooney instead of Looney. Part of this, when I was researching it, it was telling me that it could be down to the fact that Looney sounds like a comic book name and not a real name. No, nobody's called Looney, you see. It's made up, it's a lie. Now obviously there will be fictional freedoms that do stray away from 100% historically accurate depiction. It does draw inspiration from history, but again, it is not a historical piece, it is a fictional piece of work. I just think it's fun to see what is real, or at least partially inspired by the real world history. I think it's a really nice detail that's been included. I mean, Collins could have quite easily just made up some dude and been like, hey, this is little Jimmy Sr. and he's not very nice. So Michael O'Sullivan Sr., the angel, he is described to as a deeply religious family man. The religious aspect is very important, but I'm going to try not to speak too much about that just because I feel it will spoil the plot. I know religion is one of the main themes in this novel, but I can't talk about it if you don't want spoilers. So he works as an enforcer for a mob family, and this is where Junior is witness to a hit. There is going to be slight spoilers for chapter 1 because I can't really avoid it, so you just bear with me. This is one of the most defining moments in the story because this is the point of no return. This is the point where, okay, this has happened, and now your actions have consequences kind of thing. Michael puts a lot of the blame on himself, like he shouldn't have been there, but then I do believe there is a conversation with his father, and he says, well, look at the line of work that he's in. So who is really to blame? Is anyone to blame? Are they both to blame? I'm not here to prosecute them. This is also where Junior begins to lose the innocence that we so often associate with childhood. We see him face the reality of his actions through violence, murder, and the loss of his own family. It does get very, I would say, graphic, but it's sort of what you would expect. There's nothing like too sickening, but I know that there is one little narration text box that says about how, obviously from Michael's perspective, the room it smelled like death and urine and fecal matter and all the unpleasantries. So it's not glamorized in the way that a film. Looney's son Connor serves as the main antagonist for this novel. Now, Connor Looney was also a real life figure. He was the real life son of John Looney. He died on the 6th of October 1922 at the age of 20 in a shootout that did involve his father. He was laid to rest in an unmarked grave. I did have a look around. There might still be some ideas as to where he is, but I can't tell you where he is or where he isn't. With the trail of references that Collins has left us and that Rayner has illustrated, as well as graves, I'm not saying whose, that state the year is 1930, it can be suggested that creative liberty has been taken with this just for the sake of driving the narrative forward. Because if he died in real life in 1922, I don't think he's going to be able to do any of this in 1930. Might just be me. I wasn't there. Obviously, I am trying to be very vague about the story itself and what unfolds, but this is a father and son story, and it does feel incredibly isolating. The duo travel towards Perdition in Kansas, which is where Senior plans on leaving his son in the care of his wife's sister and her husband. Along the way, characters will come and go, which only adds to that element of loneliness and isolation. And the characters that do appear are very hostile and cruel. They don't really make many friends on this journey. The film takes a bit of a different route, but I did enjoy that aspect of the cast is quite small, and I feel that gives the creative team a lot more time to focus on other aspects like the relationship between the father and son. We run into several key figures from history as well here. To name a couple of them, we've got Eliot Ness. He's here. Before he was even introduced, it's 3 pages of him being in it before somebody said his name. I turned the page, I nearly jumped up out my chair. I was like, I know that man. I know him. I don't know him. I never knew him personally. He died a few years before I was born, in 1957. We also have Al Capone, and Frank Nitti is also there, so all-star cast. These characters are reoccurring as well. I need to talk about the art for a little bit here, so sit down. Rayner's eye for capturing human emotion and faces is second to none for me. The comic itself feels like a sequence of stills from an old vintage movie. Chuck a ragtime score over it and you've got yourself a film. This graphic novel is presented entirely in black and white, which not only complements the tone of the story, but is reminiscent of movies from the 20s. When O'Sullivan initially goes to Capone, he ends up speaking to Nitti. So for those of you who don't know much about him, Frank Nitti was Capone's bodyguard and later became his successor to the Chicago outfit. I love the small nods that the creative team made here. So Nitti is reading a newspaper or a magazine, and on the back of the paper we see an advertisement for 1931's The Public Enemy. The film stars James Cagney, who I would say is to the film noir genre. Am I saying that right? Film noir? Some people say noir, others say noir, and I'm just going to say noir because I'm not very posh anyway. But I think James Cagney is to that genre what John Wayne is to westerns. I don't know about you. Also, for those of you that don't know him, he was an actor in like the 30s and way back when. But when I saw like that clip of him, because the focus there is on one of the words that is just off to the side of the advertisement, being family, we kind of gather that, you know, you've got this nuclear family and then it's ripped to shreds by John Looney because he's had enough, he's not happy bunny. And maybe this is me being a bit too much of a nerd, but there was one reference in this that I just absolutely adored, and it made me see this comic in a whole different light. Okay, are you ready? There is a single panel of Frank Nitti with a cigar, and I instantly knew where the reference had come from. There's a very specific photo of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, and when I saw this, I was just so excited. Like, this was one of the most, this was more exciting than my birthday. I felt like all my Christmases had come up once. There are other nods and references to Hollywood actors and gangsters from that era. I believe that there is a couple of like references to Jean Harlow, but I could not find the exact images that it was like replicating. And while these details are very easy to miss unless you're living like it's 1926, I think it just shows a whole new level of research and dedication made by the creative team to build this world up. I mean, Rainer could have quite easily just used a reference of a random guy, a random stock image of a dude smoking a cigar, but it felt like an intentional statement to see such a niche photograph of Siegel. Again, most people would not ever think about that. I just happen to be a little bit too interested in that sort of stuff. But I will talk a little bit more about some of the references. So if you go back to Michael and Peter's room, not only do we have frequent references to Tom Mix, the little cowboy Hollywood actor, we also have a poster of Hack Wilson, who was an American baseball player. Hack Wilson played 12 seasons for the New York Giants. All of the references that we see, obviously there are some that I haven't even spoken about, but I don't want to bore you with too much of the details. They all feel very intentionally placed and the audience is repeatedly exposed to them. There is a specific focus on Tom Mix in the boys' bedroom, as we see from close-ups of magazines featuring the star, and we also see items and memorabilia relating to baseball, which just further instills the idea that these are just kids being kids in that era. Like, that's what they were interested in. Again, I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure, but I can just infer, like, you know, kids like from that time, like, oh, you've got baseball, like, whoa, I want to be like this dude, or I'm going to be the next Babe Ruth. I told you in the last video, I swear Babe Ruth did something that year, and this is what he did. Really nice how childhood nostalgia is thrown into the mix of such a barbaric, dark story with all these horrible hostile characters appearing every 5 seconds, and nothing nice happens, to see these two boys' bedroom, and it is just a child's bedroom where children are allowed to be children. It just makes you a bit sad, doesn't it, really? Before I do start to wrap this up, I will just talk about one of the important elements in the story. I think it comes in chapter 2, and it's where O'Sullivan teaches his son to drive. This would become a very significant detail later on, and as the narrative progresses, he turns his son into his little getaway driver, and, you know, other things that I'm not gonna say. I'm gonna let you go out and read it. So we have a panel of Michael, who is feeling very unconfident and does not really like the idea of driving. Yeah, me too, I relate. He says, oh, I remember I drove us into a ditch, referring to like his first lesson that he sort of had with O'Sullivan. This is a direct reference to Colin's own experience driving. He went for his first driving lesson with his dad and his dad's friend, and he says that he almost immediately drove the car into a ditch. I think that's really nice how he's included his own life experiences in this. I think it just makes it a lot more personal, even if you don't know that detail. I didn't know it until I actually read the foreword, and it does go to show that as a writer you can draw inspiration from absolutely anything and everything, and I think one of the best places to get that inspiration is from your own experiences in the world. Also, I did mention our good friend Elliot Ness. He makes another cameo here. He's here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Elliot Ness, he was an American law enforcement agent. He is best credited for putting together the Capone Squad, aka the Untouchables. But I do like how Collins has incorporated Ness into the story. Obviously Ness is more interested in Capone, but you know, O'Sullivan says, oh, I can tell you where Looney is instead, so which one do you want? Okay, you can't have both. But I'm not going to try to spoil it too much. My article is a lot more literate. When I get on here, I just tend to waffle. So again, Road to Perdition is heavily littered with religious references. The majority of the characters in this story are Catholic, and after every killing that O'Sullivan participates in, he will, or shootout, he will go to a confessional in the nearest town and tell the priest next door about all his horrible crimes that he's committed, and then he will be washed of his sins and he'll be free to go. This concept is crucial to both the father and the son, as is revealed as the narrative reaches its conclusion. I'm not going to say anything else about it, but when you finish it, I recommend going back to the start and rereading it with the knowledge that you have of the end. So this graphic novel will appeal to fans of both the crime and noir genres. I believe fans of old Hollywood will particularly enjoy it as well if they can recognise some of the faces and references that are put in there. And anyone who has an open mind towards comic books, I do tend to recommend this title a lot to people who don't read comic books. I think this is a really good title that represents that comics are not just superheroes running around in spandex. They can be well thought out, articulate storytelling mediums of any genre, and I think as well, especially paired with Raina's beautiful art on this one, I definitely converted a couple of people to actually reading a comic. This was like their first comic book. I was like, oh, you wanna dabble with something a bit more graphic and visually appealing than a novel? Get yourself a graphic novel. Go get Road to Perdition.